Hi, you are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Now, I met today's guest a few weeks ago at the introduction of our episode number 48 guest, four-time Olympian Joetta Clark Diggs. Now, Joetta said to me, trust me, you will love her and you will want her on your show. Now, what better endorsement could you have than that? Dawn Fitch is the founder and CEO of Pooka Pure and Simple, a handmade bath and body company. She is also a terrific speaker, as I found out during her keynote presentation at Joetta's Fit and Phenomenal Women's Empowerment Summit a couple of weeks ago. I wish, though, that I had just hit record on that entire session. I am going to get her to give you the recap today, but let's just say she had all the tweeters in the room, including me, spontaneously using the hashtag GameChanger during her talk. Now, I'm going to let you tell her about her own Game Changers. What I will tell you is that the story includes battling symptoms of a then yet undiagnosed illness, recognizing the need to adopt a healthier lifestyle, and making and selling her own skincare products. Her company, Pooka, and I will also let her tell you how she came up with that name, has grown from her apartment kitchen to a major showroom, and her products are currently sold in Whole Foods, as well as online and through various distributors. Now, if you weren't lucky enough to catch Dawn's speech at the Women's Empowerment Summit, you may have also heard her address the Black Enterprise Entrepreneurs Conference, Girl Scouts of America Gold Awards, or the Black MBA Association's National Conference. Or you might have seen her on the Today Show, CBS Evening News, or any one of a number of other TV shows. In 2012, she graced the cover of Black Enterprise magazine, lucky them. And this year, Pooka has been featured in Essence magazine as one of their top 20 Black beauty brands. Most importantly, Dawn is a health advocate who uses her platforms to support women suffering from autoimmune diseases to explore natural healing and lifestyle changes. She started a Facebook community called the Best Life Tribe, which we're also going to hear about, where women can share and learn about alternative health and healing. The group began in November 2017 with 20 women, and you know it has now grown to over 2,400 women. Please help me welcome Dawn Fitch. Welcome to the Ladies' Room.
Hi, Dr. Donica.
Hi.
Very excited to be here.
A pleasure. Such a pleasure. So tell me, before we get into Game Changers and Pooka and your whole health story, tell me, aside from this interview, what's the most unique, interesting, memorable, or different kind of experience you ever had in the ladies' room?
Okay. I do have something that sort of evolved in the ladies' room.
Okay.
I was having a very nice conversation with the woman in the ladies' room, and I think we were talking about, for some reason, perfume. And, and I know for me, we were talking about dating and things we had just got into this conversation, and we had a great time. And then I walked out of the ladies' room and walked through the entire restaurant with my dress tucked in the back of my bloomers.
Oh,
it was hard. And my family could see me and they're like, stop. And I'm waving.
And you're like, hi.
Yeah, hi. And I'm like, oh yeah, I met this lady. They're like, you're dressed. I'm like, okay. That's sort of in and out of the ladies' room.
Yeah, that started there.
Yeah,
I think most women have a story like that.
Yeah.
Actually, one of these days I'm going to do an episode where we're going to just talk about embarrassing underwear stories.
Oh my gosh. And I had on my mommy drawers, and it was just horrible. Packed. The restaurant was packed. Oh.
So that was not a game changer experience.
No, not at all.
Talk to me about, let's just totally switch gears and talk to me about how you came up with this concept of game changers for your presentation at the Women's Empowerment Summit.
I actually, a quick synopsis of the business. I started the business 17 years ago in my kitchen, and I wasn't trying to be an entrepreneur or start a business. I went to school for graphic design. I was working in the city, and I just started getting sick, really run down. I thought I was just tired. And as the years went on, I just wasn't getting any better. And I had seen so many doctors, and they kept sending me home and telling me that I was healthy and, that I was okay. I was like, all right, well, if I'm okay, but I still feel good, I've got to make some changes. So I just started changing my diet, and it was hard. I love sugar, like I love sugar. So I just took out like things like white flour, white sugar, just tried to make some big changes. Turned over the bottle of my Bath and Body products, and I was like, okay, the skin is the largest organ. What I put on there is going into my system, and I'm trying to clean everything out. So I just started, Googling, healthier things for my skin, things we eat, olive oil, sunflower, things like that, and started to come up with these products. And I did think I was a little Dr. Donica. bad Dawn. But people would say, oh, I have this, I have that. I can make you something. So I started making things for everybody. And I was really enjoying aromatherapy and the essential oils. And I had so much stuff in my house that my friends were like, let's take it to a festival. Just see if you can sell something. I had no desire. And I always tell the story because I had no desire to do it. I really just wanted these new shoes that I saw. Sell some products, I can get these shoes. I was like, so every time I tell the story, people are like, that's why you started a business? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. But we went and we sold out. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is stuff from my kitchen that people are buying.
So you got the shoes in 3 different colors.
I did. I got a lot of shoes that day. I was very happy. And fast forward, it has been 17 years, and we have had some amazing things, some amazing blessings happen, just some stories. And I started to see a correlation in everything. And the funny thing, let me also say the name Pooka, because people are like, what does that mean? My mom, when we were little, called us her Pookalitas. I don't even think she knows what it means, but it's one of those, you fall down, skin your knee. Mommy's like, where's my Pookalita? And you just feel better. So I wanted to just put Pookalita on the label, and I just couldn't fit it. So I cut it, came up with Pooka. So people are always looking for these great things about the name and, how did you come and start the business? And I'm like, shoes, and I couldn't fit what I really wanted. They're like, great, Dawn.
Actually, now you need a line of Pooka shoes.
That might be coming soon.
And please make them practical, no heels, comfortable, and cute.
Yeah, I'm pretty much past that heel stuff. Everything is practical. Every time I go to the mall now, I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, easy spirits, and I try them on, and they're comfortable.
I always, just to distract you, they used to have that commercial where there were women playing basketball in Easy Spirit shoes. And I said, I could be their spokesperson because I actually could play basketball in Easy Spirit shoes. They're that comfortable.
Exactly. And I used to be like, no, I will never want. Now I'm like, you know what? I go right to the section and I'm okay with it. I feel good. Mm-hmm. So it has been like 18 years of, like I said, ups and downs and just blessings. But I started to notice a thread of things. When really great things happen, people would say like, oh, that's a game changer for your business. And I'm like, when I started to think about it, I wanted to let people know that we have a little bit more control of our game-changing moments. And when I really started to adopt this premise, it really changed, I don't want to say it changed the face of my business, but it changed the way I thought about things, that I had more control to actually have game-changing moments. And I think a lot of people miss the game-changing moments because they celebrate the victories. And the victories we can't control, but those moments we can control. So that's what I really started to build a whole keynote speech about this, because I really wanted people to get this message. And especially when you go to these women's empowerment, those are places where your game changers are happening. When you go to meetings and things like that, they're happening every day, but we just celebrate the big wins, the outcome of it. So I think when we shift our focus a little bit and start really paying attention to what the game changers are, we can start creating a lot more of them.
Well, and I love how you began your talk, and I should have begun this conversation putting this question to our audience, which was, you asked everybody to think about what the biggest game changer was that happened in their own lives. And I think most of us did think about pivotal things that led to a big outcome.
Right.
And then you proceeded to kick our butts and to point out that the actual game changer was when you were doing what you were called to do, or when you were doing what you were supposed to do, or when you took action that benefited your life or yourself, or more importantly, somebody else's life in some way.
Right.
And that ultimately led to something that looked like the game changer. But the game changer was really the homework and the
Right.
groundwork that was laid way in back.
The stuff that's not so sexy. But I like to tell it because when I started the business, when actually I did start, making the products and selling the products and saying, okay, this is going to be a business. I mean, it was great for a while, but then money started running low. And I always tell people, like, I had to start waiting tables. Nothing wrong with waiting tables. But I was, I thought I was this high power graphic designer working in the city. And, now I was in there, slinging my ribs and things like that. But the great thing about it was the man who owned the restaurant was amazing. And he became a wonderful mentor for me. And I worked for him for maybe 2 years, and I would talk about the business and he would help me. And, I made sure I went every day. I respected the fact that he was giving me a lot of time and helping. And about 2 years later, he said, you know what, I'm opening up a catering space, but I'm really only going to use it at night for parties. He said, during the day, you can have it as your store. And I mean, this space was beautiful, and he charged me no rent. And I was on a major street in Montclair, New Jersey, which is a pretty big city, and paying no rent. And so a lot of people said that was a game-changing moment, Dawn, like that, that opening that store. And I was like, nope, the game changer was me agreeing to put my pride to the side, to sell the ribs, to humble myself, and to do the work. And that's where I think we miss those type of things. I couldn't really create the fact that he was going to offer me the store, but by doing the things that I needed to do, being humble and listening to him, that was the game changer that created that amazing moment. And if we start looking,
it wasn't just showing up and slinging ribs.
No,
it was also recognizing that here was somebody who had a business who you could learn a tremendous amount from, even though your business had nothing to do with ribs, other than maybe what you were putting on your own skin.
Right.
Right. But you recognized that here was somebody you could learn from. So it was definitely putting your pride aside, but also saying that we really can learn so much from other people if we just ask and B, listen.
Yes. And humble yourself. Sometimes we think we know so much and we already know what we need to know and where we're going and how to get there. And we don't have a clue. Sometimes, like you said, we just have to listen. And our business, the business is just, I have 20 of those moments like that where amazing things happened, but they were because we were doing the things that we were supposed to do.
Are you still in that space?
Well, at that point, no, we left that space because he then put a restaurant in that space. That was fine. We went over to, we opened up a warehouse space, and it was really nice. And I said before, I was working in Sony Music previously. So they were, a couple of friends were like, why don't you come back and show us your products? And I was like, I was being, again, so prideful. Like sometimes you really have to put your pride to the side. I was like, do I want to go back and show them I'm making oils now and blah, blah, blah. But like I always tell people, I wanted another pair of shoes. And I was like, maybe they'll buy something and then I can get some shoes. So I went back there and I set up my little table and, I showed them, and they were my friends. They were gracious, they were nice, and they liked the products. But the woman who actually took the job after I left said, you know what, I have a really great friend who works in Whole Foods, and I want you to call him and meet him. And from that connection, we're now in Whole Foods Market. And so people are like, that's a game changer, Whole Foods. I was like, no, agreeing to go back, putting my pride to the side, working my business, doing those things, that's where we make those shifts. And I got a great blessing out of it, and Whole Foods came, but I couldn't create Whole Foods without deciding to make that game-changing moment. So I really started to focus on, trying to help people refocus their game-changing moments, because in those moments you have choices. I could have said no. I could have said no, I don't want to go. No, but I made the choice to go, and because I wanted to further my business and get the shoes, and that created something amazing. So I think if we start looking at things that way, like how can I, what I'm making this choice. Is it the best choice for me? Is it the best choice for my business? And then you see when you sort of make those great choices, everything is not going to be a major moment, but I think you'll get a lot of game-changing moments. So
yeah, I thought about the moment that led to my first medical job. When I was in college, I had, physics was required, and I put it off till I was a junior. And they were, the first day you're supposed to pair up with somebody and be lab partners. And there was this very nerdy freshman boy who nobody was really talking to, and he was kind of on the side. And I said, okay, I'm going to be lab partners with him. in part because I felt sorry for him, but in part because I also said, if he's a freshman and he's taking this class, he must be a little genius. And that's who I want to be my lab partner. And it turns out he was. And every week he would do most of the work and I would sit there and talk and I would write up the lab report. And we had a good relationship. And one day I'm just rambling on and on about how I need to find a summer job and I'm looking for some kind of, hospital job, pre-med kind of thing, because I'm going to be applying to medical school. And he's just listening and doing his lab work. And then he finally says, okay, I'll talk to my dad. And I said, who's your father? And he looks at me and he says, you don't know who my father is? I said, no. And he looked down and he said, I thought that's why you wanted to be my lab partner.
Oh.
I was so sad. And it turns out his father was head of medicine at Cornell, New York Hospital.
Wow.
And
okay, that's a game changer.
Not only did he get me a summer job, he got me an amazing summer job.
Oh my goodness.
With the man who was one of the men who was involved in discovering Rh factors in blood, and who was just this brilliant researcher and had so much of and became my first, medical mentor. So interestingly, fun fact, I ran into this guy at a college reunion about a year ago. I hadn't seen him in over 35 years. And I told him this story and he had no recollection of the beginning of the story until the part where he helped me get that job. Wow. So I thought that's what you think of.
But that's amazing. Like you made that choice, which resulted in this amazing, and it's so funny. The girl in me, I thought you were going to say, and I married him.
Oh, no.
He was amazing.
I wasn't that charitable. And I would say that I did say that to his face. But I love the story you said about that you also shared about when your church came to you and asked you to do some pro bono work on a project.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
As an entrepreneur, you get so busy, and I'm just so busy, and I was just doing my work, and I went to church with my mom, and we went to church, and they were like, we need you to help us to make a brochure. And I was like, oh, I can't. I love you, Jesus, but I can't. But I did not say that. I was like, yep, because I knew it was my faith is important to me, and it's my responsibility. But it was going to be such a long project. I knew it was long. So they paired me with a woman who was new to the church. And I went to her house like 2 or 3 times a week for about maybe 2 months. We worked on this project, and she was
brochure.
Yeah, it was so long. We had to put people's pictures in, and it was a lot of work. But she was just so gracious. She always had food for me, and she loved hearing about the business. And I just went there and I would vent and I would talk about this and talk about that and talk about my wins in my day. But she was so great. So I think we worked on it about 2 months. The brochure was beautiful. We presented it to the church. I felt really good because I knew I did what I was supposed to be doing. And that was it. So then maybe about a week later, I saw her in Whole Foods. Whole Foods is always a part of the story somehow. I saw her in Whole Foods. And she was like, are you ready to be on TV? And I was like, what? And unbeknownst to me, she was a VP for NBC's The Today Show. And she never told me, and she just listened to me, and she pitched a story about women entrepreneurs and the ups and downs and things that they go to. And from that, I think it was maybe 3 weeks later, we were featured on The Today Show.
That's
and
awesome.
You can't buy press like that. Like that was national. Our website was amazing. And again, people were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. The Today Show was really going to change your business. Like that must have been a pivot. No. And I tell people, agreeing to do the things that I was supposed to do, like go to church and do the brochure and things that were part of my moral fiber, doing those things, that was the game changer. And that's where we have them. Like I wouldn't have had the Today Show if I didn't do the other things that I was supposed to do. So I'm telling you, as I went along with the business, I started seeing these things and like, wait a minute, like we're missing something. Like this is where these great moments are happening. So I really, like I try to tell like young girls, I speak to young girls, these are where your moments are happening. When you go places, when you go to these women's empowerment and meetings and even on the street, the things we learned in kindergarten, speak to people, listen, be polite. You never know what you're going to get, what you're going to hear, and follow your moral compass. If you're things that you know that you're supposed to be doing, you got to do those things. If you make commitments and trying to live with integrity, and I'm still working on all this stuff. I mean, it's a work in progress. But when we do those things, then amazing things happen. Amazing things can happen.
Yeah, I had a
So
similar experience the first time I was on the Today Show. I was 7 weeks postpartum from my first baby. I'd had a C-section, and I had to fly to Chicago for the American Medical Women's Association, which is the only national organization of women physicians. And I was elected president-elect. I did not want to go. I was exhausted. I was tired. It was the first time I was away from my baby. And everything went well, and I was planning to just fly home the next day. But they got a call from the Weekend Today Show saying, do you have somebody who could come talk to us about women's health issues? And it should have been the sitting president, not the president-elect, but she was a psychiatrist, and she didn't really feel comfortable talking about heart disease and breast cancer and other medical issues. So I got asked to do it, and I just didn't want to do it. I had to get up at 4:00 in the morning, and my big problem was, where am I going to find somebody to do my hair and makeup at 4:00 in the morning? I had to do it from a satellite hookup from Chicago, and I just was so tired. And my husband actually said, you got to do this. You got to do this. And I was like, why?
I don't want to.
So I did. I got up and I did it, and it went really well. And they kept calling me back every couple of weeks and eventually offered me a contract for a new show they were doing, which was the Later Today Show. But if I had not agreed, obviously, to do that first thing, to fill in for the psychiatrist who couldn't do it, then it wouldn't have happened. So it was kind of all one of those serendipitous things.
Think about it, you could just trace down your life like a million, and you could trace it back to those decisions that we make.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful.
And usually they're decisions in that moment of, I don't want to do this.
Right.
And that's the perfect segue to bring, we could talk about career stuff and being an entrepreneur all day long, but this is a health show and a women's health show. So let's bring it back now to the background. What was also going on in your life this whole time was, this medical problem, which was a mysterious condition for a while. You knew something was wrong with you. You saw a number of doctors. They all told you everything was fine, or maybe they told you were stressed or working too hard or needed to make lifestyle changes, but you knew something was going on. So how long did it take you from the first time you said, I just don't feel right, till you finally got a diagnosis?
8 years.
Wow.
And because I was diagnosed along the way. But I knew it wasn't right. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr. What else did they say I had? It was just hypoglycemia. So every time I heard something, I'd be, okay. And then I would read on that, and I would, try and change my lifestyle for that. But it just never seemed to, I was like, this is not it. So then in 2007, I was at my parents' house, and my hands and feet just went horribly numb. Horribly no. And if you're, for 8 years, I had been really researching things. So my parents were like, we're going to the emergency room. And the doctor asked me, and I said, I always say that I don't ever remember another doctor asking me what I thought it was. And I said, all right, from the things that I have researched, I said,
so he said to you, what do you think you have?
He said, what do you think is wrong with you? And I was like, huh? What? And I said, either diabetes, but I knew it wasn't diabetes because I had a lot of urine tests. I said, or multiple sclerosis. And he was like, okay. So he gave me an MRI, and and it may have been that there were no lesions present before. But
had you ever had an MRI of your brain before?
I had MRI. I had MRIs. I had nerves. I had so many things. But that day when I went in, he found a lesion, and he's like, "You've got MS." And I said, for a minute, I was so excited. I was like, yes, because you can't fight what you don't know. And
exactly.
This was
you finally knew who the enemy was.
Yeah, I knew who it was. I was like, all right, now I know what I need to do. And I mean, that was a brief moment of then I was like, what? So that quickly was like, wait a minute.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 37.
Okay, so you were usually people are diagnosed with MS or multiple sclerosis between 20 and 40. Although, it can be diagnosed at any age. I actually met a woman at the gym a couple of weeks ago who was diagnosed with MS in her 60s.
Wow.
And she said the first thing the doctor said to her is, she said, I think I have the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. And he said, well, you're too old for that. And she said, on the one hand, she said, well, I know there's a compliment in there somewhere, but
I just can't see it right now.
I'm not feeling it. So
Wow.
she was in her 60s when she was
Wow.
diagnosed.
Yeah.
So I said, sometimes our bodies just don't read the textbook. But we do
Right.
know that it is more common in women than men. We know that
Yeah.
it tends to be more common the further north you live. So you live in New Jersey, which is pretty far from the equator. And we believe there may be some genetic components, but also some environmental components, but we don't really know what causes
Right.
it. Now, we do know there are certain things that cause it to flare up. Have you noticed that?
Heat, definitely. I fight in the summer, and also when I eat really poorly. For me, I try not to, and it's a battle. I try not to eat sugar, which I know is the enemy, but I love sugar. Sugar when I do, and the funny thing is, I gave up gluten, and I was like, I don't know if that's going to be it. And I don't really think I felt different when I gave up gluten. But then one day I had a big bowl of pasta. Horrible. Like I felt really, really bad. I was like, oh, okay, I feel. So when I don't eat well, when there's heat, when I'm super, super stressed, I will start maybe not having an episode, but sorry, I'll get like a very, very tingly. I'll feel like something's starting to happen. And, I still try to talk myself down and not get nervous and get my rest. But it's hard. Entrepreneur life is great for MS and horrible for MS. It's great because I can take the time when I need it, but I push myself so much more, and then I really, really feel it.
Okay, so when you lack sleep, how does that affect you?
Yeah, a lot of brain fog. Like I'm just not clear. I'm crabby. I'm like, what?
And that may be one of the reasons they might have thought that you had chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, both of which can have brain fog. But what other symptoms do you have? You had the numbness in your hands and your feet, which is
I had a period of really bad. I would go numb from the waist down.
Oh, wow.
I mean, where I couldn't feel my legs and it would last for like maybe not long, 20 seconds, and then I would but I couldn't drive because if I was walking somewhere, I would have to lean on something or I would just go down, and it was really, really like I was devastated for that. It lasted about a year, and it got to the point it was so bad it would happen like maybe 18 times a day.
Wow.
And depression set in. I was just like, oh my goodness. And then I started taking all my nutrients and eating better and doing things like that, and eventually it healed. That was a blessing. But then the next year it happened to both arms. So then I would be doing something and both arms would go. Again, I couldn't drive. I couldn't really do anything. Now, after the initial time it happened, like it would last maybe 8 months or 9 months. So after that first month, I started to get used to it. Like, okay, I knew how to, maneuver things if it happened, lean or do something like that. And then I didn't have it for 2 years. And then it came back again and it was one arm and one leg. So it just has been very disruptive. I haven't had that, thank God, for a while. But then the next series of symptoms, and they would come in almost like sets, like 4-year sets.
So it sounds like you have the relapsing remitting form.
Yeah. Because I would be fine for a year, and then I'd be like, maybe I don't have it. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe, they're like, okay, no. But then I started getting a lot of vertigo. And that's where I am now. Vertigo and the leaning and the spinning and, and then that would go away.
What about visual changes?
Visual, not so much.
Okay.
A lot of tingly, a lot of legs, and a lot of feeling like my legs were like rain was on my legs and things like that. So a lot of nerve disturbances with arms and legs. Nothing really visual, no bladder, but just a lot of vertigo, headaches. Now I will get like double vision or something like that now with this.
That's
and
pretty classic.
It'll last like maybe 10 minutes and I'll know like, okay, something's happening. So I'll go get an MRI and then I might have a new lesion or I might not, or it might be a flare up because I'm working too much or doing. So then I know it's time to take it down. So I just really try to manage it and keep, because if you really, there are some days I could really just go down that rabbit hole. I'm like, nope, don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, the one thing I think about MS is it is different in everyone. Mm-hmm. So then there is hope that, maybe this will be it and I'll be okay. So I try to just live with that and do the things that I need to do and get support. Every time I meet somebody, there's just somebody either knows somebody or they have MS themselves. It's just, or they have some sort of autoimmune lupus or.
Well, there are a lot of autoimmune
So
diseases that we lump into the same category. And what makes something an autoimmune disease, for obviously you know this, but for people who are listening, it's when the body attacks itself because it recognizes something in its own self as foreign. So in the case of multiple sclerosis, what's being attacked are the myelin cells, which are the what provides that protective coating around nerves. So we call it the myelin sheath. And it's analogous to, the lightning cord that you use to charge your phone, that white coating on the outside of the wire. Sometimes you can see it starts to fray or it starts to break down. And that's very similar. And that's what we talk about when we say, what we see on the MRI exam is we see these, lesions that are caused from that. But other symptoms that people can have, weakness, speech problems. You clearly don't have speech problems.
Yeah, I talk a lot.
Muscle spasms. We talked about the vision changes that can be blurry vision, double vision, just impaired vision in one eye, usually, but sometimes in both eyes. Tremors. Have you had any of those?
I've had that too. Yeah, I definitely have had that. I have that in hands.
And then, of course, the imbalance that you mentioned and the gait problems. I met another woman recently who had the classic gait abnormality, and she was really struggling to walk. And I said, using a cane would be so much easier. And she said, but I don't want people to know that I have a problem. I said, well,
so instead you just walk and knock people off the sidewalk. That's what I do. I'm just like,
I think the falling over on one side is kind of a clue. But even though most of us know somebody who has MS or multiple sclerosis, it's not actually that common. There's only about 350,000 people in the United States who have it. But to put that in perspective,
mostly women?
I'm sorry?
Is it mostly women?
Mostly women. Men can get it, but it is more common in women. But to put that number in perspective, the Multiple Sclerosis Society, says 200 people are diagnosed every week. Unfortunately, most of those people have a story like yours, where it took them an average of 6 or more years to get properly diagnosed.
Wow. Yeah. And you know what else is really bad? The cognitive. Like I'll start to talk and then I can't remember what was I going to say, or it's almost like it stops and like I can't even remember what the next word is. So I just stop talking. It doesn't happen a lot.
Part of that is MS. Part of that
is 51.
Your age.
Exactly.
And, being in that perimenopausal, time frame. So, menopause has all of its own things. Yeah. And unfortunately, you can have MS and menopause at the same time.
And this is a funny story. I was having visual disturbances I couldn't see. So I went to the doctor and I was like, you know what? I think I'm having something going on with my MS. I'm just not seeing. And she did the exam. I said, I can't read things. And she was like, how old are you? I was like, I'm 50. And she was like, sweetie, you just need some bifocals. What? No, I'm having an MS attack. This is not what that is. I don't need bifocals. I was like, oh. So I've learned too that everything is an MS.
Right.
And that's a little scary because sometimes I push everything. Oh, well, if I don't feel this, like, oh, it must be the MS. And I have to learn to make sure that I check out what I need to check out, get my mammograms and all those things because everything is an MS. Obviously, I just need bifocals. So
yeah, and some people just need reading glasses.
Right.
So I remember I was doing a program years ago on menopause, traveling across the country with Lauren Hutton, talking about menopause. And at the time, she had other things. She's quite an entrepreneur in addition to being the first supermodel. So one of her entrepreneurial ventures is she had a line of eyeglasses and, eyewear. And so she used to always say, if you're over 42 and you're not wearing glasses, it's because you haven't been to the eye doctor in too long. And I was about 42 when we were doing this, and I would always laugh. And then literally one night I was at a restaurant and I couldn't read the menu. I was like, and I'm holding it further and further away. And one of the guys I was having dinner with said, he handed me his glasses and he said, here, try this. And I used these glasses and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, who's your eye doctor? He goes, Dr. Rite Aid. $10.
Oh, that is so funny.
Right now I'm wearing reading glasses.
Yeah. And they're amazing. When I first put on, I was like, I can see everything.
It's a miracle.
Miracle. Wow.
The miracle of sight. I was cured by Dr. Rite Aid.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's a lot to combine it with menopause and MS and everything else. I'm like, okay. But
so the other bad news that I'm sure somebody has told you is very often when somebody has an autoimmune condition, they can have more than one. So I'm assuming so far you just have MS.
Yeah. Is that very common?
It's pretty common. I actually did a podcast episode 2 weeks ago with Rabbi Robin Nafshi, who has Sjogren's syndrome, which is another autoimmune disease. And she has Sjogren's syndrome and fibromyalgia. So she has both. And of course, when you have more than one thing, that really clouds the picture. But in MS, the good news in a way is we can do an MRI and see the lesions and make a conclusive diagnosis. In many autoimmune diseases, there's not like a single test that can prove this is what you have. You know, like for fibromyalgia, there's no test that can tell us that's what your condition is. So in order to make that diagnosis, we have to rule everything else out first, which, as you know, is a lot of tests and a lot of doctors and, you know, a lot of head scratching. So that can be very frustrating for patients. Yeah. The other thing, of course, that you mentioned that's very frustrating for a lot of people is, especially in the beginning, going to doctors and you're saying, you know, I just don't feel well, you know, and I'm having all these vague symptoms, and they gave you possibilities that are syndromes like chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a constellation of symptoms that we don't have a blood test for. So very often, you know, doctors will throw that out as, well, maybe you have this and maybe you have this, but I don't really know. And quite honestly, it doesn't really make a difference for anything other than peace of mind, because there's no specific treatment for many of those conditions. For fibromyalgia, there is. For fibromyalgia, there are prescription medicines. But for something like chronic fatigue syndrome, there's really no medical therapy. For MS, there is. Now, are you on prescription medicine?
I wasn't for the first 7 or 8 years, I wasn't. And then I had some extreme family stress, and I just wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And my holistic doctor is holistic, but he's an MD as well. And he was like, the thing about holistic is you have to do it. If this is the way you're going to fight it, you know, if you're going to do, you know, diet and nutrition, if you're not, and you're keeping your mind positive. And he was like, you're just not able to fight right now. You're grieving. And, you know, because I had said, like, I was just not doing, I was eating cake. I was just, you know, so he was like, maybe you need to do something. So I did go on, I'm on now Copaxone. And I've been on that for about a year. And I guess the thing that's hard for me is, do I come off or do I stay on it? I don't have any, you know, adverse reactions to it. It's definitely covered by my insurance. I think it makes me a little lazy though on my holistic side, because I feel like, all right, I do have some protection. I'm doing something, so I can have that little piece of candy. No, that's not good. So that's where I'm sort of torn as, you know, how long do I stay on it? You know, should I just stay on it for life, or it's just
that's a question for your doctor to deal with. What I want to say though about the holistic approach to medicine is what people forget about the word holistic. You know, as your doctor said, you've got to do it. It means the whole thing. It doesn't mean one from column A or two from column B. You know, like I'm just amazed by how many people I've talked to over the years who've been diagnosed with diabetes. And they say to me, well, instead of taking medicine, can't I do diet and exercise instead? No, you could do the medicine and the diet and exercise. And type 2 diabetes, maybe then if you're successful, we can get you to the point where we can talk about coming off the medicine. So, but until then, you know, we've got to hit this, you know, with everything we have and all of the tools in our tool chest. And
do you think nutrition is super important for the autoimmunes? Like
I think nutrition is super important for everything.
Everything.
That having been said, I don't always practice what I preach. I am really good at telling other people what to do. That's what doctor means. Doctor means being really good at telling other people what to do. But nutrition is super important, but we don't have a specific diet for every specific illness.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, each person's individualized. So when I talked to Raman Nafshi the other day, for example, about her Sjogren's and her fibromyalgia, she has identified very specific foods which are highly inflammatory for her condition. And this is very common with people with fibromyalgia. They can identify certain foods or beverages that, you know, just will set them into what's called a fibro flare. And not everybody responds to the same foods and the same beverages the same way. Migraines are another classic condition which, you know, really respond badly to certain foods and beverages. So classically, like red wine can cause a migraine trigger, or aged cheeses, chocolate. So, you know, that's a real super. And yet some people don't have that reaction. Some people get migraines because of stress. Some people get it triggered by sleep deprivation. Some people can't identify what their triggers are at all. So it really just all depends. As I always said, it all depends on everything. But you have to figure out what, you know, causes the flare-ups in you and what keeps you on course. But you might want to have this conversation with your doctor about how long you should be on the medicine and whether your regimen is the kind of medicine that you can only take when you have a flare-up and not because you have this, you know, relapsing, remitting kind of pattern. And quite honestly, I am not a neurologist and not expert enough to know these medications in your condition. And certainly I would never, you know, make a treatment recommendation in a podcast. But that's something that, or if I do, it's not intentional. My lawyer always wants me to say that, but sometimes I forget because of that whole menopause thing. But that is something you should put on your to-do list to talk to your doctor about, you know, whether that's a possibility. You know, very often when patients say to me, how long do I need to be on this medication? I'll say, you know, make some wise guy comment like, well, how long do you want the benefit?
How long you want to be okay?
Yeah, like only, and it's a natural reaction for people once they're doing well on a medication to say, okay, I'm better. I don't need this anymore. Well, why do you think you're better?
Exactly. No, you're right.
Yeah, that's just something that the great news is that you're not having any side effects from the medicine. Of course, most medicines have some kind of side effects. And
well, I do have a little extra belly here, Dr. Donica.
Well,
that's a little
menopause discussion.
Yeah, exactly. That could be a whole combo of all that stuff. That's true.
Yeah, Tyra Banks likes to call that little belly thing the muffin top.
Yeah.
I call it the menopot.
Either one. Yeah, I got the muffo menopot.
But that's something that you need to listen to the podcast interview that I did with Joetta Clark Diggs about that, because she is somebody who certainly inspired me. She is so disciplined, and obviously having been a 4-time Olympian and coming from an Olympic family, but she walks the talk.
Yeah.
And
you can see it in her physique. I'm like,
she looks amazing. But she works to look amazing. And in my interview with her, she gave very specific homework to all of us about, you know, her success strategies and her plan. And I wanted to say, oh, could you just be my coach?
Right. Could you just come to my house and help me to do this every day? I'm going to listen to that podcast right now.
Yeah, that was a good one. And this has been a great one. And I know that so many people will benefit from having heard your story and heard your great advice. Just to recap, what would you say is the number one thing that you would tell any woman who's newly diagnosed with an autoimmune disease?
One, find support. Get a great doctor. Like I said, I went the holistic route, but my doctor was amazing. And he said, well, we'll get you to the point where your body's great, but if you need a medication, you're taking medication. But he appreciated I did go to one neurologist who just like, diet doesn't make a difference. I was out the door. So you have to have somebody, but I say for me, it's the support. I surrounded myself, and my faith. I surrounded myself with people that poured into me, and I, changed my thinking. And I think the mind is so powerful. Like, I believe I'm going to be okay, and I think that's sort of where it starts. So that's the one thing I would say. Surround yourself with good people. Laugh a lot, because I laugh a lot. Have faith, and just keep your mind positivity.
So just wrap up then, tell us very quickly about your Facebook group that you started.
I was having a bad MS moment, and I was like, I know there are a lot of people out here who are going through what I'm going through, and I really needed support for myself. So I started a Facebook group called the Best Life Tribe. And it was myself and 20 other women who I knew had autoimmunes and, who were just trying to be better and do better. And we talk about different things. Dr. Donica, you got to come on. I promise I'm not playing doctor in there. I promise. I give out tips that I've learned. I'm like, read this for yourself.
As soon as we get off, I'm signing up for it.
Please do. The Best Life Tribe on Facebook. And now it's 2,400 women. And we talk about food, we talk about diet, we talk about exercise, we make, DIY body products. So we have a lot of fun in there. And I hope that it's a source of support for women to know, one, they're not alone, and get some tips when they're not feeling well. So.
That's awesome. And last word, tell everybody where they can find your website.
It's Pooka Pure and Simple, really long, but that's POOKAPUREANDSIMPLE.com.
Awesome.
PookaPureandSimple.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And I am going to go on your Facebook page right now.
Yes. Go and get us right, Dr. Donica.
No, I'm going so I can get me right. I need support too,
No, look, then we both need to go to Joetta's page.
Yeah, there we go. Take care. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.